Hey everybody, welcome back to Mike's Garage. Today we're working on a 2008 Saturn Aura XR. This has got the 3.6 liter V6 and we've got a no crank, no start. We're going to go ahead and diagnose this vehicle and then figure out what it needs. Alright guys, so the first thing that I always do is I always check the battery voltage first. So we're going to take our DVOM, we're going to put it on the battery and figure out what our voltage is. That'll give us an idea of if the battery's even charged or not. So you guys can see we have, let's get those wires out of your way. Hold on one second. Looks like we've got, let's see here, 12 volts exactly, 12.03, 12.04. So this battery is pretty charged, so it doesn't look like we should have any issues with battery power. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the starter circuit and see if the starter is getting power when the key is on. So to check to see if the starter is getting power, we're going to take our test lead here, or rather our test light, and a lot of people call it a scope on a rope. And we're going to take that, we're going to go down to the contact, which should have 12 volts, which will be the signal wire on the starter. It should have 12 volts and should light this up when the ignition switch is turned on. If it does not, then our problem is not at the starter but before it. So our problem is somewhere before the starter if this does not light up. If it does light up, our problem is most likely at the starter or it is the starter. So we'll go ahead and do that. Right, so to get to the starter, it's down under the front side of the engine here. We're going to have to remove this intake tube and probably even our air box over there. But anyway, so we're going to go ahead and get that off real quick. Alright everybody, so the next thing we're going to do now that we have those off is we're going to disconnect this oxygen sensor harness here, and then we're going to disconnect this bolt here and that bolt there. There's one down at the bottom too for that exhaust manifold cover, but the third one is missing on this car, so you'll have one right over here, one here, and then we'll go ahead and disconnect this oxygen sensor wire as well. So on that, you just pull this tab up and then you can pull this part out, and then this part is held in by a plastic pin that you can pull right out of this wire harness. Kind of get it out of our way, set it aside, and I'll grab an extension here. Then we'll go ahead and remove these two bolts here holding the exhaust cover on. That one loose. That one's in there pretty tight. Now we can remove our exhaust cover. So we'll go ahead and back this up here. Alright, now that that's off, we can kind of see our starter a little better. So I'm going to set that off to the side here. Okay, so unfortunately, I was already looking up the procedure and I already knew this before starting the video, but so it looks like to get to the starter, we're going to have to remove the front exhaust manifold. So, and I just put all new gaskets on this system probably 2 weeks ago. So I could think it's kind of crazy that I just took all this off and did new gaskets and then the starter fails and I got to take it all off again, which sucks, but not a big deal. So really, there's kind of an easier way to do this. And so on the exhaust manifold, you've got your bolts that hold it to the cylinder head. Underneath, this pipe that goes underneath the car has a flex pipe on it. If you take off these bolts that hold the manifold to the engine, you should be able to move the catalytic converter and the manifold back, like tilt it back, and then you'll be able to get to the starter much easier. Okay, so now that we got the manifold out of the way, this is where we test our starter. So I've got my test lead, or my test light, connected to the negative side of the battery, and we're going to go ahead and test the connection. So it lights up here, meaning I have a good ground. You always want to check your ground before you do any testing so you avoid any false results. So we're going to go ahead and test our starter now. So the first thing we want to do is, I'm going to zoom you down into where the starter is here. Okay, so, alright, so this is what we want to test now. So what that should have is battery power, because that's our positive going to the starter. So our test light lights up, and that means we have power at the starter solenoid. That's the power that's actually going to activate the starter when it needs it. Anyway, so next we're going to check the actual command feed, which is a signal that goes from the key to the starter solenoid that would actually engage the starter. Okay, so on the starter, this is the wire that we want to disconnect from the starter. So we're going to get a pick. It's coming. Almost. Come on. Get out of there. Right, we may need some flathead screwdriver action here. Okay, so you see we're getting it. Okay guys, so now I got this connector out. So you can see the connector here. This is your signal wire that would supply 12 volts to the starter solenoid. And we're going to go ahead and make sure that that has power when the key is on and you're cranking. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take our test light, make sure that our ground is good. So we're going to test our connection. Our connection is good. You can see the light. And then we're going to connect our test light right inside of that connector. And we're just going to let it hang there. And you can see what I mean. So the test light is going to light up if we have 12 volts at that connector. So we're going to go ahead and turn the key on and see if the light turns on. And we're cranking, letting off, cranking, letting off. All right. Okay, so with this diagnosis, we've just figured out that the starter does have power for the starting solenoid, so it does have a signal from the ignition switch, and it does have power from the battery. Therefore, I would say that the starter is no good, and so we're going to go ahead and remove it and try and bench test it, and I'll show you how to do that as well, but I'm going to go ahead and order the starter because I'm pretty sure this one is toast. Okay, so now that we've gotten the diagnosis down, we're going to go ahead and remove the starter. At this point, you need to make sure that you have disconnected your battery, at least at the ground cable. Okay, so I've finished up the assembly, the reassembly. We're going to go ahead and verify our repair and start this vehicle up. thanks for spending a couple minutes of your time in the garage with me today. I hope you guys learned something. Maybe you know how to diagnose your own starter issues now. That's the whole point of this video. Hope you guys have a great day. Like and comment, subscribe to my channel. It would be greatly appreciated. We'll see you guys next time.